and we're ready to go.
Okay, welcome back to everybody. Hopefully everybody's on board. Our speakers today program are Hope Clark, who is a mystery writer. And I am, as I've seen in the comments, people are familiar with her. And I just started really enjoying it. But the reason I got to know who Hope was through her website and newsletter called Funds for Writers. So we'll have a chance to talk about that, because as Crystal in our group, you need to be introduced to Crystal Rhodes, because she emphasizes to everybody that if you're writing, you need to be paid. So I think that that website is extraordinarily important for authors. There's Crystal, our award-winning playwright. And then her husband, Gary, who I have not met, is a former ATF agent in Georgia. Is that correct? No. Former Homeland. I'll let you introduce yourself here in a second. So the only thing I'm going to point out is that before, or just 2 days ago, I received the e-newsletter from Hope, and it was about speaking. And she commented that in her appearances, she's talked about her newest releases. She's talked about how she became an author. She's talked about details of writing a book and the genre. She's talked about anecdotes of being a writer, and she's talked about funds for writers. So we're going to cover all those topics today, I hope, if we have enough time. So let's just start. Gary, Hope, just tell us a little about your background.
Want me to go first? Okay.
I'll let you guys decide that.
Yeah, my background, my degree is in agriculture from Clemson University. So if you know anything about my work, my first series was actually about an agricultural investigator, Carolina Slade. So that's kind of how I got started. But I worked for 25 years with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I've always written, and when I worked my way up into management, I wrote everything from congressionals to speeches to justifications for budgets, you just name it. And just decided I needed to start writing a little bit for myself. And once I learned that I could probably make a couple dollars at it, at 46, I put in my papers and retired, and been writing full-time ever since.
Very good. Just before we go to Gary, when were you hit with the writing bug? Was it later in life, or did you always want to be a writer?
I've not always wanted to be a writer. I've just always written. Even in school, if a teacher said, "Hey, the final exam is going to be essay," I'm like, "Got this," because I loved writing, and I've just always written. And every promotion, every step up in my life involved writing. And I learned early on that you want to prove how intelligent you are, you learn how to write well. And so I didn't start writing for myself until I had a friend actually ask me, what do I write as for entertainment? And I realized I didn't do it. So I started doing it. It took a few years to evolve. I had to find a voice first. I wrote a mystery, and which we can talk about how we got involved with that later. But I wrote a mystery, couldn't sell it, and picked it back up 4 or 5 years later once I was a better writer, and put it back together, pitched to agents, and finally found a publisher.
Very good. So Gary, how about your background?
I have a bachelor's degree in sociology as well as an associate degree in criminal justice, earned in the University of Georgia system. My first law enforcement position was with the state of Georgia Alcohol, Tobacco Tax Division, which was under Department of Revenue. I was a revenue agent. We looked for moonshine. Stayed with them for a couple of years.
Now you didn't find any moonshine in the back hills of Georgia now, did you?
Oh yeah, it makes the prettiest blue flame when you ignite it. Very, very enjoyable job. The most fun job I ever had in my life. But once I left there, I wanted to go to the big show, you know, be federal, and of course get more money as well. So I applied for every federal agency that you've ever heard of, and I can assure you some that you never heard of. But I was finally hired by Uncle Jimmy Carter when he was beefing up the U.S. Border Patrol in the latter part of the 70s. I was hired as a Border Patrol agent, completed their academy, was assigned to Chula Vista, California, which for those of you who aren't familiar, that was south of San Diego and 2 miles north of Tijuana. So we got a good bit of activity there. I stayed there for a while until I could find a home back in the South with investigations. Transferred to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Office of Criminal Investigation. Stayed with them for about 12 years, then transferred to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Office of Criminal Investigation, and stayed with them until I retired in 2006. So about 32 years of law enforcement experience.
Now, this question I wouldn't normally intrude and ask this, except Hope, you indicated it's a good question to ask because apparently there's a good story behind it. And that's, can you explain how the two of you met and how it's impacted your writing?
It is a good story. When I was with USDA, I was offered a bribe. And you don't offer.
Okay, I gotta ask. Okay. What does an agent with what does somebody with the agricultural department get a bribe to do?
This particular farmer wanted me to grab him a piece of land that we were getting ready to take into our inventory. A farmer had died. We were, there was debt on the land. We were taking the acreage back into federal inventory. I guess you don't call it foreclosing because he passed away. And so we pretty much absorb it to pay the debt. But anyway, a farmer down the road from him wanted me to get the land for him on the cheap or little or nothing. And he offered to bribe me with $10,000. So I, as I'm supposed to, reported it to the Office of Inspector General, Criminal Investigative Division. And 2 days later, they sent an agent to my doorstep to interrogate me, make sure I was on the up and up before they started the investigation. And the next day, two agents were in my office disguised as auditors. And we tried to do a little sting operation for a couple of weeks trying to catch this farmer. But to make a long story short, he was the agent. So after the case, we hit it off, and about 18 months after the case, we got married.
Very good. I don't know that I've ever heard of anybody who's met their husband by being interrogated.
I wasn't happy about it at the time, but.
So uh, let's talk about that a little bit. What are the most important ways that a spouse, or the most important things a spouse can do to support uh, a spouse who's around?
There you go. I'll let you do that one.
Basically, just be there all the time. I'm fond of saying, in fact, I coined my own title. I'm her uncompensated executive personal assistant. So I have absolutely no authority, but total responsibility. If anything gets screwed up, I'm responsible. But one of the greatest things is just time management. It takes a lot of time for her to create, and there has to be pretty much silence within the realm here, and no distractions, no disturbance. And with regard to her projects, her writing projects, whatever she asks me questions about or wants to discuss, I'm just there. As far as her edit process, I listen to every single chapter during the draft process several times, because it's drafted, initial draft, then rewritten, then modified. I hear every version, and then typically at the conclusion of her draft, she rereads the entire manuscript to me. So time, basically.
That's interesting. So, Hope, you actually read out loud
Yes,
your drafts?
I actually do. And I do it every step along the way. When I get several chapters done, I'll run into the den and go, hey, you got a moment to listen to a chapter or two, and I'll read them off. But when I get it all put together and I've done a good hard edit on that first draft, I usually sit down and we read it from beginning to end. Sometimes it's in the den, sometimes it's out on the back porch, depending on the time of year. And we laugh about, a lot of them have been done with bourbon in hand until it just got silly, and then we put the manuscript down, but no, I'm a firm believer in reading aloud, because your tongue will trip up every mistake.
So, from standpoint of Gary's listening to it, do you make comments, Gary, or suggestions, or do you simply serve as a sounding board?
No, I'll frequently make comments or offer suggestions. Generally, it would be some technical aspect, firearms related, physical confrontation, the actual choreography of that, and sometimes just language. But if it catches my attention, I'll make a comment, and she'll explain why that needs to be the way it is, or she'll modify it, in the manner of her choosing.
So
that
that leads into my next question, which is, what are the most common mistakes you see in mystery stories, thrillers, even television shows? And what's the worst mistake you've ever seen in a mystery story, or a movie, or a television show?
First off, I'm not a big reader. I don't enjoy reading. I read too much in my career. That's one reason that she reads aloud all of her work to me. I've never read one of her books. I've heard them all multiple times, but I've never actually read one. Most of the biggest problem with screen depiction of investigation, it gives everybody the misconception that law enforcement can accomplish a often major investigation in the span of an hour, not counting commercial time. But frequently, it's a real annoyance to me to see just procedural errors that are there's no excuse, and that their technical advisor, if they had one, should have caught it. One of my favorite faux pas is when someone's using a semi-automatic pistol, and when you, for those of you who aren't familiar, when a semi-automatic is magazine fed, it has X number of rounds in the magazine. Every time you fire, of course, it depletes the supply. On the last round, fire locks back because the magazine is empty and can't feed an additional round. That's called being out of battery. Frequently in these shows, I'll see somebody supposedly continuing in a firefight, and you look at their weapon and the slide is locked back, clearly out of battery, and you know the guy's out of ammunition. And if he's doing anything, it's just saying bang, bang, but he's certainly not firing a weapon. Other things firearm related, people on these programs will frequently sweep their partner. And sweeping is when you swing the muzzle of your weapon across the body of a friendly. In other words, you swing your weapon around unintentionally, but you're pointing it at a friendly. So that's a big safety no-no, and good training prevents that even in a stressful situation of a firefight. Other things are some of the chases, both foot and vehicle related. I don't know that I can think of an absolute worst thing that I've ever seen in a movie or on TV.
What's the best one? Is there one that stands out to you that they actually do things right?
Oh, let's see.
I haven't seen one in a long time.
Likewise, they all have errors.
The 3 FBIs are some of the worst.
Oh yeah, they're
we won't
horrible.
watch them.
They are totally horrible. What is it? FBI Most Wanted, FBI International. Those are clown shoe shows to me. Most of them are just trying to make social statements rather than depict how the FBI actually operates. But
yeah, lawyers have the same issue when you watch shows, and I know it's a South Carolina set book and it's got raves as a bestseller, but I will say that Where the Crawdad Sings may be a wonderful book to read, but the legal part of it is like she watched Perry Mason to do her research or something.
Yeah.
So Hope,
I have a question that's coming from Chad if you're interested.
okay.
Two related questions for Hope. I've listened to the first 4 books in your Edisto series. The first 2 are narrated by, I believe, professional narrators, but you narrated Echoes of Edisto and Dying on Edisto. Did the publisher pay for the first 2 narrators, and did they pay you?
Okay, on that, out of the 15 books I have outstanding, 12 are in audio. I've personally narrated 9 of them. The first 3, the publisher was pursuing doing audio. They would not allow me to read it because they just had a standing policy. The authors didn't read it. They didn't want to open that door because so many authors cannot read their own work. They just don't have the voice. And so but they didn't want me to do it. They did the first 3. And we were pumping out some books at a pretty good pace for a traditional press. And they contacted me and said, we don't think we're going to do audio for a while, if ever. And I said, I want those rights. If you're not going to do them, let's don't waste them. Let's you return those audio rights to me. And they did. I was already narrating for the South Carolina State Library in their talking books for the blind. I was reading for them. And we just decided to narrate my own books for that system. And I killed 2 birds with 1 stone. And no, they did not pay me to do that. I just took back my own rights.
Oh, okay, that's great. Pamela said, by the way, I much prefer your narration.
Most people say that.
Yeah. So Helen said she'd like to know about your audio narration. Did you buy professional equipment?
Well, at the time it's funny, I recorded them 2 different ways. One was I actually went to the production studio at the South Carolina State Library where they narrate audiobooks. So I had a producer who was doing all the editing. And it was slow. It is so slow to do an audiobook because in an audiobook, mine average 11 hours a piece. And for me to read them is going to take double that because you go 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And then there's the editing. So it takes 3 to 4 times as long to do 1 book. And you can't always just read them straight through because your voice won't hold out. But if you do it over several days, you've got to make sure your voice is consistent over those several days. There's an art and a science to it. But then COVID hit and interrupted what we were doing. I couldn't go into the library. So I helped them develop a grant to do a portable audio studio. And I got this monster suitcase that had the laptop, the mic, the headphones, the technical equipment, and loaded with the software, which is called Hindenburg, by the way. And I narrated, gosh, I don't know how many books out of my walk-in closet. I put moving blankets around all the walls, and I sequester myself in there and record audiobooks. And I dare anyone to tell the difference. We were so successful at doing that, and the library was thrilled. And then the producer retired. A lot of people retired at the end of COVID and went, I'm not going back. He retired. So right now I am without a producer, and I have about three more books I need to do. So I'm about to probably buy a new laptop and all the equipment. That producer luckily is advising me on what I need to buy. And I'll just return to recording in my closet, to tell you the truth. I'm going to have to learn how to edit. I can do major, big picture macro edits, but in the fine tune of a word here and a word there, and we were very good at dissecting this. There's a finesse to editing a word or 2. And make it sound consistent. So that I'm going to have to work on. But yes, we're going to record some more. We're going to record the 3 more and the 4th I got coming out. But I've just got to get that audio set up.
Thank you. There's a comment that I would like to read from Janice Thornton. She said, "Hi, Hope. I'm thrilled to finally meet in quotation marks you, because had it not been for your weekly newsletter, I might not be a published mystery writer. I found the publishers for all 3 of my mysteries thanks to you back in 2014 and around 2019. So thank you. Thank you. I tell all my writer friends to subscribe to your newsletter." That's from Janice Thornton.
Thank you,
Okay,
Janice. I
well-
recognize the name.
She's a really wonderful writer.
Well, since we have moved in that direction, let's go ahead and follow up. Let's talk about Funds for Writers. How did that start? Start by telling everybody what it is and what you try to accomplish with it, and how it started, and what your objectives are with it.
Funds for Writers started because I couldn't sell my mystery. I was researching grants, contests, more contests than grants at the time, because my strategy was to write and then submit to contests. And once I won a few contests, then submit to agents. I thought that was a softer round of rejections than to go straight to the agent route. But my first book, Low Country Bribe, that thing's been written 3 different times from scratch. I mean, I threw away manuscripts and started from scratch 3 times on it, because I just wasn't finding my voice. And I do believe that's the reason so many people publish prematurely, is they don't wait until they've found their voice. But I put it up on the shelf, and I had studied so much about contests, and I already knew about grants from my work with the Federal Service. So I noticed there was nothing out there. I had all of this resource data and material, and I hated that it was just going to waste. And at the time, there were only 2 other writing newsletters in existence. This newsletter is 22 years old. And when I started publishing it, the others were about writing or how to write for a magazine. So there was nothing like what I was doing. And I saw the niche, and I published it out for a handful of writers I knew. Well, in 2 months, I had 200 followers, and in 6 months, I had 2,000. And right now, I've got about 25,000. And it goes out every Friday. It's free. And it's to provide resources for writers trying to earn a living. And the categories are contests, grants, freelance markets, and publishers/agents. And I keep up with what's going on in the business. And as I see a new opportunity, I pop it in the newsletter, and just goes out every Friday. So it's something I can't let loose of. It's kind of like a tiger by the tail. As many novels as I write, and I keep saying, do you need to keep up with Funds for Writers? And then suddenly I'll get all of these accolades and success stories, and I go, well, I guess you need to. So I'm one hat's Funds for Writers, and the other hat's mystery novelist.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask this, because you have written now, I think you said 15 novels that have been published. Is that correct? And then you have Funds for Writers that has been going for 22 years. And then you have recorded 9 of your own novels.
Right.
And you're buying equipment so you produce your own inside your closet. What does an average thing look like for Hope Clark?
I kind of missed
And
that.
don't sleep at all.
Oh, do I? sleep
I'm
at all?
sorry, I'm on this. Well, the question is, what's an everyday look like, Clark, and does it include any sleep at all?
I don't know what you call my average day. I sit right here a lot in my study. This is my writing studio right here. And Funds for Writers has a Friday deadline, and I try to have it completed by Tuesday of every week. And that has been ingrained in me as a habit for so long that I can do it in my sleep. And I have so many resources and, feelers out there for what's going on. I subscribe to a lot of different newsletters and blogs and things that understand grants and go into depth about contests. That the material's not difficult to find, but it has taken me a few years to get those resources. But my day, I will sit down and actually, I will go through email first to make sure there's nothing pressing, whether it's funds for writers or it's a publisher or it's an appearance. And I will manage those, and then I'll sit down and start cranking out whatever assignment I've got at the time. I do a blog for Writer's Digest that comes out once a month. But what I did for that, I can't stand just trickling things. When they gave me that assignment, I sent them 7 months worth of blogs and went, good, I don't have to worry about you for a while. It's just easier for me to do it that way. I can write nonfiction like that. Fiction is what drags me out. And so I wait until I have a big pocket of time every day to sit and write my fiction. But if I'm under contract, I give myself 90 to 120 days to write that book. I write 1,000 words a day, and 120 days allows me a day off here, there, and yonder. But it's always pressing on me, get your 1,000 words, get your 1,000 words. And I will have to say, he's good at saying, did you get your words done? Did you get your words done? And if I'm really pushing it, he'll scoot back in here and he said, you need something to drink. You need, he respects what I'm doing. And it sounds like I'm sun up to sundown writing, and I'm not. I think the habit of writing every day greases the gears, so to speak, so that when you sit down, you can pick right up and do it again if that's what you're used to doing. When I teach writing, I tell people to write a day here and a day there. If you're writing a day here and a day there, you're only hurting yourself, because it's sluggish. You got to remember what you did. You've had time in there to forget where you were, and you're not on the edge of that story that you're writing if you're not doing it every day. So but I have personal things too. I mean, I've got my garden. My garden's coming in right now, so I stay busy with that. I've got my flock of chickens that I absolutely adore, and I work out at a gym every day. So it's a fairly full day, but it's at my speed.
So having a husband from law enforcement, how does that impact your writing? How does it impact your editing process? How does that go?
Oh, it helps tremendously. If I get to a point where I'm not gonna make it up. I'm not gonna Google everything. When it comes to anything law enforcement, I will stop, go back, make him mute the TV or whatever he's doing, and go, got a question. What if, and fill in the blank. And he'll give me my options as to what would happen in that scenario, or what kind of firearm. In this book that I've got coming out this fall, it's number 16. I've got a 90-year-old gentleman who's lived out on Edisto Island his entire life, and he shoots deer and puts it in his freezer. So I went back there, I stopped, went back there and said, okay, I got this 90-year-old man, he's lived alone and he hunts deer. Well, he happens to be a deer hunter too. And I said, what kind of firearm would he prefer? And so he, let's see, let's give him this. And he rattles it off. And I go, okay, sounds good. So, and I get him to explain it to me so that I can talk it. I make notes, go back to writing. There's none of this waiting until the work's done and then we go through and have to edit all that stuff and make it correct. I know when to stop and ask a question. So it makes it very convenient.
So to what degree does Gary, and this is really for both of it, does he impact the storyline, if at all? Or is it just simply with the technical ends of things?
You answer that.
Cheers.
I'm the storyteller. If we're going to butt heads, it's if anybody tries to move my story in a different direction than where I want it to go. He doesn't do that. He knows the story I'm trying to tell. He's keeping me technically accurate. Now, he may tell me something technical in terms of how an interview would go down, the information you might, pull out of someone and the manner in which you do it. And it may trigger something in me to go, oh, I can take it this way. And then, I go back and rewrite. I love rewriting. I absolutely adore editing. I despise first drafts. So I want them as close to right the first go around as I can get. But there is no, I've sat down before with him and say, I'm kind of stumped at this story. This is where we're at. Of course, he always knows where we're at because we edit chapters at a time. And I'll go, would this work? And he'd go, no, that wouldn't work because of this. And we kind of bounce stuff back and forth. We've spent 2 hours trying to figure out where to take the next chapter before, where I kind of painted myself into a corner. But he's not going to direct the story.
Well, that brings us to the inevitable question that somehow gets asked of every writer, I think, that we have. Plotter or
Plotter or pantser?
Pantser. You're right by the seat.
I am a pantser, and I will tell you, the little piece of plotter that's in me is where I will sit down and by hand scribble ideas and concepts as to the direction I want to go. And I will then sit down and write those chapters, however far they go. I don't sit down and outline chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, because it's never right. Never right. So I just do concepts. And then I sit down and write until I run out of material. It could be 1 chapter, it could be 5 or 6. And then I'll stop and think about this and go, okay, now where are we going? And I will scribble down notes again and sit down and write anywhere from 1 to 5 chapters again. So it's fairly much a pantser type situation. And when I start a book, I never know how it's going to end.
Do you surprise yourself?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Every once in a while, I'll go, why don't we go there? Oh, yeah, let's do that. I've, like I said, painted myself in a corner. I've got, characters going in all directions, so many red herrings planted just because they were cool to plant. And then I'm trying to pull it around, and I know where I need to be at the 25, 50, and 75% mark of my book. I've done enough to where I know what the pace needs to be and about where I need to be in the story. And I keep track of that percentage as I'm writing. And so I will surprise myself every once in a while. I will suddenly, I Palmetto Poison, I got into it. I went, somebody's got to die. I mean, we haven't killed anybody yet.
Oh, hopefully she's not looking at you, Gary, when she decides that.
But we laid out all the characters, just laid them out and went, which one of these are we going to kill off? And remember when we did that? And yeah, and from there, then you're writing the story off in another direction. I mean, you've always got to have a body. It's just deciding where you're going to do it and how you're going to do it.
Sometimes we have to watch our conversation. For example, when we go to the gym, if we're on the track, we're plotting on how to kill someone and technically, specifically, how to best achieve it. And we have to be cognizant of other traffic on the track so that people don't get concerned about having a couple murderers on the track with them.
Have you ever had somebody approach you or anybody call somebody and say, hey, maybe you should look at these people?
No one's ever approached. I think that'd be kind of a foolhardy move, but We've had a couple of second glances as we went by or as they went by. But it's really just amusing more than anything else.
We talk murder a
You know,
lot in this house.
it does bring up an interesting thing about maybe at some point in time a story where somebody overhears somebody talking murder and thinks it's a couple of writers, and it ends up that it's not. But so, Gary, have you ever thought of writing a novel yourself?
Oh no. No, I wouldn't know how to begin to write anything fictitious, and I'm afraid that 32 years of composing investigative reports, they're meticulously accurate and precise, but they're not really that entertaining to read to somebody looking for a little recreational sport.
So how does writing, and this is personal, you'll have to answer it if you don't want to, but how does it impact your relationship or the discussions about murder all the time?
Oh, that's entertaining. That's fun. I know when we watch movies, mysteries, suspense, thrillers, mostly mystery, it's a little bit of competition as to who guesses who did it first. Or we'll stop. I mean, he's been known to stop it and he'll go, "Did you catch that?" You know, I mean, as it's going along, we're watching for all the little clues and all the little hints and trying to put together who did it first. And it's, when it comes to true crime, he's guessed, I won't say guess.
That's right. Wrong word.
He has nailed it so many times when somebody's announced, oh, there's a murder, and we'll both go, I think so-and-so did it. I think so-and-so did it. You know, it's nonstop conversation in this household. We've had 2 out of 4 sons went into law enforcement, so we can have some macabre conversations.
So
It pulls us together. I mean, it's part of our fabric. It's just part of who we are.
Are either of you characters in any of your books?
You want me to answer that?
Hey, you know what I think.
The first
We don't know what you think. That's the thing.
The first series is the
No.
Carolina Slade series. Okay, that was based on an agricultural investigator. And like most new writers, you write what you know, and 9 times out of 10, it involves you. You know, so Carolina Slade actually does what I did in my final years working for the federal government, and I was a special projects representative, which was in essence a troubleshooter. And I did a lot of internal investigations, or I did the precursor work to any investigation until it was blatantly criminal. And then I had to pass it over to the criminal investigators. So I worked in tandem with a handful of those. And so I gave Carolina Slade that job. Well, that makes her an amateur sleuth because she doesn't hold a badge. Now I make her a little harder than an amateur sleuth. I'm not a big fan of cozies, nothing against those who write them, because there's some success stories out there. Just not my choice of read. And I wanted her to be a little tougher than that. I like blood on the page, not off the page. And so, but her still being an amateur sleuth, it means she's got to have somebody in law enforcement to make her legit. That's the rule for amateur sleuths. And so I gave her a federal agent that she met on a bribery investigation. So Carolina Slade starts off the first book, the first few chapters are pretty autobiographical, and then they have to take off because we didn't have murder in our case, and I had to put some murder in there to spice it up. So that's as close as we get. So this is, I mean, he's been asked, are you Wayne Margot? And he's not real fond of that. But he kind of is.
Okay, so you mentioned about your choice of read. I won't ask Gary this because we already know, but how about who are you reading? Who do you really like to read? Who are the people out there that you would suggest that if we're not reading your books, we should be reading their books?
Okay, I'm a Karen Slaughter fan. I'm a Lisa Gardner fan. I've read everything Sue Grafton did. I had every one of her books, some of them autographed. When it comes to classics, I'm a big Raymond Chandler fan because I love noir fiction. I like noir mystery. I love the verbiage. I love the the ominous feel of it. I'm trying to think who else. My books over here. Howard Brown is somebody I absolutely adore that most people have never heard of, and it's hard to find his books in print. But he wrote in the 50s and 60s, and he wrote a very noir private investigator, and his dialogue is wonderful. So I study his books, but he's like a spinoff of Raymond Chandler or Dashiell Hammett. But I'll read anything mystery or suspense.
One of the things that I want to make sure we cover before we leave is funds for writers. People interested in subscribing, can you tell them how they?
Okay, I kind of missed some of that. They can, let's see if I can put this in there. So, I mean, it's easy to sign up at the website.
And the website is?
Yeah, right on the front page. I mean, it's just like it sounds, Funds for Writers.
.com.
.com.
It's in the chat too. And it's on the web page for this event. So.
Okay. Any more questions from our chat group, Elizabeth?
No, there have been some comments. One was from earlier where Keith said, "Get paid for your writing." Amen to that. And when Gary was describing his title, his job title, in their family business, it's like, that title is the best. Haha, that's from Vanessa Stevens. Carol Hall mentioned that the biggest mistake is calling a burglary a robbery. They're two separate definitions. I don't know about that. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. And assault and battery are two different crimes too.
Ah, interesting.
He corrects me on that type of thing. So no, I've learned all of those terms thanks to him. Yeah.
Okay, and then when you're talking about how to murder people while out on walks, someone said that's basically the plot for Finley Donovan is Killing It. She is overheard talking to her agent in a Panera. That's Pamela who said that. Helen thinks that Hope would enjoy John Sanford books.
I've read a lot of them. Yeah.
Okay, and Hawthorne mentioned that he has a lot of Howard Brown. Hey H, is that because is that because of your mother-in-law's
Yeah.
oh, that's cool.
I love Howard Brown. He's amazing.
Yeah. I'll have to pull him out.
Apparently,
yeah, sorry.
Hawthorne and his wife inherited from his mother-in-law like the biggest collection of pulp murder mysteries and body covers and all of that from the 40s and 50s. He's been sharing them on Facebook.
Oh,
So we're running,
Jennifer M. would like to know the title of your book with the amateur sleuth.
The Carolina Slade Mystery Series, and there's 5 books out.
so the, after all your experience, so what advice would you give to mystery writers, thriller writers about writing, about educating themselves? What's the best advice you can give to them?
Okay, I'll let him handle part of that and I'll handle the first part. It's, I've already said, I believe people ought to write some every day. All of your serious writers that are making the big bucks do. They treat it as a job. I believe that you should be reading every day in your genre. I know there's a lot of argument about reading all different genres so you can get a feel for this. And I'm the first person that's going to say, nope, not doing it. Because if I want to get to be a better mystery writer, I'm only going to live so long. I want those minutes crammed into learning how to be a better mystery writer. Romance doesn't fit, sci-fi doesn't fit, fantasy doesn't fit, so I don't read them. Not that I have anything against them. It's just that I prefer mystery. And I think mystery is the only genre that pits the author against the reader. And the author is writing the story saying they're not going to get it until I do my aha moment at the end. And the reader's like, I'm going to guess this before we get to the end. I mean, it's a challenge. It's the only genre that does that. And that just totally whets my appetite. I love that dynamic. But in terms of, what did I want you to answer?
Probably,
How about it? Go ahead.
probably to educate yourself,
Yeah.
to do research so that you understand what you're writing about, so that you get it correct. You know, whether it's if it's at all law enforcement related, whether it's police procedural or just a mystery, whatever it happens to be, you need to understand what you're talking about. Best way to do that, if you don't have the personal experience, is contact a professional in the field who does have the experience and can explain things to you. Basically, what I do for Hope. But having said that, if you're writing about murder, don't ask your local traffic officer to be your technical expert, because the areas within law enforcement are often very specific as to the expertise, you know, just like any other profession. So you want to consult the type of expert that matches up with the type of story that you're crafting.
So are people in law enforcement, and I know you can't answer for all people in law enforcement, but are they open to writers calling up and saying, hey, let me buy you a cup of coffee. I'm writing a story and I want to make sure I get some things right. Are they open to sitting down and doing that? Or what's the best way to approach an officer to get somebody to talk to you?
Well, obviously the best way is to already have a personal acquaintance or a friend of a friend or something of that nature. But if it's just a cold turkey call, just get hold of probably a supervisor and tell them who you are, what you're doing. A lot of departments offer ride-along programs for civilians, where you can actually attend a couple of little warm-up classes and then do actual ride-alongs on a shift with a police officer. If you've never done one, that's a good icebreaker. It kind of gives you a little bit of cred when you start asking questions, because you've had exposure to the unique language of law enforcement.
There's a great comment from Terry Odell, who's our speaker next month. He says, I offered to buy a homicide detective a cup of coffee. He asked me if there was an ale house nearby and he could bring some friends. Best money I ever spent.
They love
So,
talking about what they do. They really, really do. And so if you sit there and take care of them, they're going to feed you all kinds of information. Most mystery authors have their connections that they fall back on. I will tell you that make sure you do get it right, because a ride along isn't in New York isn't going to teach you the dynamics of a police department on Edisto Beach, South Carolina. It's totally apples and oranges. And they can't necessarily, each of them can't necessarily tell you what the other does. So you've got to know whoever you're writing about, you need to go to that expert. So you need to know whether it's federal or state or local. And if it's local, is it going to be big city, medium city, small town? It really, really matters. And I use that juxtaposition in creating the Edisto series, because the protagonist, for reasons to snub her parents, went from South Carolina to Boston and wound up being a detective in Boston PD. Okay, that's huge. That is huge. And of course, her job was very defined. She had all types of technical and forensics backup to help her with. However, when she comes down to Edisto Beach and ultimately becomes chief of police of Edisto Beach, she's seeing crime that nobody ever saw before. And then when she goes to help solve it, she's got no backup. She's it. So it's worlds apart. And that's part of the dynamic I use in the Edisto series. But just whoever you're writing about, make sure you drill down to the right resource.
that brings me up. We're running up against our time here, but I had two things I wanted to ask you. First of all, is we commented on this earlier. I didn't realize Edisto Beach was a real place. Why did you choose? For example, I know we talked about Sue Grafton. I love Sue Grafton's books. She used Santa Teresa as her town for Kenzie Milhone, but it was really Santa Barbara, and everybody knew that. You, on the other hand, go to a very small community, Edisto Beach, and don't change the name and leave it as a real place. Why the choice, and what was the reaction in the town to that choice?
I've always liked writing about real places. Carolina Slade, I started off writing about real places. I wanted her to be the Sue Grafton of South Carolina, and every crime she did was in a different county. And having been with agriculture, I knew every county. And also, frankly, I'm sick of reading books about Charleston, South Carolina. So, there's more to the state than that, and I like my state. But no, I choose real places because people adore knowing real places. They will pick up a book because it is set in a real place. On Edisto Beach, well, I'll put it this way. When I was writing Carolina Slade, my publisher stopped me after 3 books and said, we want you to do a second series. And I didn't know what to do. So they gave me 3 parameters. And that was, 1, she had to be real law enforcement, which wasn't a problem for me. Second, it had to be in one place, not all over the state. And 3, it had to have a lot of Southern family drama. The real place is what stumped me at first, trying to find one place that was worthy of a series. So I gravitated to the low country along the coast. And I went to Edisto Beach because it is nothing like Charleston. It's nothing like Myrtle Beach. It's nothing like Hilton Head. I wanted something totally different. It's secluded, it's jungle, it's in the middle of nowhere. And publisher loved it. But I did that because I know it. And when the tourists go down there, I have been in that bookstore. They have this little tiny bookstore. Last year sold 1,000 of these books. This year they've already met that and they're selling more. Because every weekend the tourists come in for their little beach houses. There are no motels. They don't allow motels. So they come in and they're there for a week. Well, they come in and stock up on books to read on the beach. And they will walk in the door and go, do you have anything on or about Edisto Beach? Fiction or nonfiction? Fiction. They point them to an entire table of my books. And people adore it. I've gotten gift cards from the restaurants thanking me for putting them in the books. I use the real streets. I have changed the addresses because I have had fans try to find real houses in the books. And of course, I don't need that to happen. And if wherever a body drops is a fictitious place, everything else is real, and people eat it up. It's just a difference. It aids their vacation, if it makes sense. And I've had a lot of people go to Edisto who learned about it through the books.
Excellent. Absolutely excellent. One last question, which is, since you have Funds for Writers, again, fundsforwriters.com, best piece of advice you have about obtaining funds if you're a writer? What's the best way to go about if you have an idea?
Well, what are you calling funds? Because to me, funds is a conglomeration of contests, grants, and freelance markets. I think every writer ought to be a freelance writer as well as a novelist. I believe every novelist, when they get ready to produce a book, needs to be out there putting themselves in blogs, magazines, websites, everywhere online to promote themselves, which makes them a freelancer. And whenever possible, get paid for it. In terms of finding grants, I always say start with your state arts commission. Every writer needs to know what their state arts commission is about because they have grants. Now, every state's different. Some are better than others. Some are funded better than others. But those people have their finger on the pulse of where arts money is. So even if you don't get one of their grants, they can steer you in other directions. So I keep on top of all the arts commissions. But that would be my best advice in starting is to start there.
Listen, I hope, Gary, this has been a fantastic program. Already seen comments in the chat room about great programs. So just thank you so much for taking your time, sharing with us your wisdom and your knowledge. And the fact is, I'm going to encourage everyone, the Edisto Beach book that I'm reading is great. I'm enjoying it. And it just hits a sweet spot for a summer mystery read. It really does. And Funds for Writers. I encourage everybody who's in this group should be subscribed to your newsletter. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We enjoyed
I think that does the program. Thank you.
Goodbye.